funky flesh, wiggling with friends, and wild-flowering reorienting toward a reciprocal science of psychedelic connection. David Riley Campbell, August 8, 2025, University College Dublin, Ireland. In fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Master of Science, Cognitive Science. Acknowledgement. I would like to start by thanking Amber Rosenreiter, Antonia Platzer, Gabe Bennett, and Harrison Parks for the friendship and journeys we have lived together. With them, I want to thank the other countlessly unnameable human and other than human friends which I've had the privilege of loving and knowing along my wanderings. I also wish to thank the land and people of Ireland, whose living traditions of imaginative mythos, revolutionarily rational criticism, and poetic presentation has been a fertile green ground to grow this work. I would also like to thank my family, who taught me the values which ever nourish my unfolding and flow abundantly throughout this work. Penultimately, I would like to thank my teachers at University College Dublin, whose granting me room to roam creatively allowed me to find my own voice. Lastly, I would like to thank the wisdom of my psychonautic teachers of all places and ages, in both their soulfulness and substantiality, whose artistic medium may well be chemical, but which my wandering eyes see as a much wider ecosystem of entheogenically esoteric characters and journeys. At some point in the writing process, this work transmuted into a love letter for all these people and the ideas, stories, and agapic love they have shared with me. I hope that this work can help to clarify some of the drawn-out ramblings of mine, which they have so patiently let be, reflect the strangely emergent beauty of our trips in the unfolding of its reading, and that it may do justice to the wisdom you have so lovingly shared. Impulse. Introduction. When comparing the Psychedelic Festival, Lehigh 2023, Mosina and Michael 2024, and Clinical, Carhart-Harris et al. 2016, 2017, 2018, Eritzo et al. 2018, Kalin et al. 2018, Lyons and Carhart-Harris 2018, Roseman et al. 2017, Watts et al. 2017, context, a clear difference can be observed in regard to set and setting. Set refers to one's mental states, e.g. personality, expectation, emotions, while setting refers to the environment in all its perceptual, social, and ecological complexity. Together, these fundamentally shape psychedelic experiences. Eisner 1997, Hartog-Zone 2017, 2022. When examining our two contexts, a most striking difference can be found in the role of one's body and its relational action with its environment. In the clinical context, the role of the body and action in the environment is minimal, with patients remaining immobile during their psychedelic experience. On the other hand, the festival context wholeheartedly embraces the role of the body and its movements in the world as a foundational component of the set and setting of transformative psychedelic experience. This makes the festival setting resonant with claims found in 4E cognition, specifically embodied and inactive theories, which state that we come to understand ourselves and the world through bodily interaction with our environment. Varela 1991. Thompson 2007. Contrasting views of mind as abstract and disembodied, these theories claim that mental capacities arise from the bodily structures of an organism and its interactions with its environment. Thus, organisms do not passively make sense of their environment, but rather actively perceive it through bodily engagement. Favoring a more disembodied conception of mind, the clinical trial overlooks the role of the body and action in the environment, highlighted by the 4E approach in facilitating transformative psychedelic experience. Turning to the festival setting, we can observe a wide range of embodied socio-environmental activities which facilitate therapeutically beneficial transformations. In order to better understand how the role of the body and action in the environment shapes psychedelic experience, we will examine how conceptual frameworks found in 4E cognition can shed light on the ways in which dancing in social settings may lead to therapeutically beneficial transformations. Where the beat begins, the dancing body. A core component of both therapeutic and psychedelic transformation is understanding. In a typical therapeutic dyad, a therapist's questioning and reframing helps a patient to develop new understanding of the cause, meaning, and products of their emotional landscape. Therapists are keenly aware of the profound power of the tongue and jaw to shape oneself when a client utters something like, "I'm a terrible person," or "I'm doing the best I can and should be proud." But what of the other self-shaping movements of the body, which may not involve inner representations cast in language, but rather a direct lived relation to the world? Locatelli and Wilson, 2017. Through therapy, a patient may come to better understand the role of their intuitive gut feelings, why certain things trigger them to be hot-headed, or what things they feel in their heart matter most. Varga, 2018. Similar emotiosomatic descriptions of feeling stuck in the body are repeatedly reported in psychedelic experiences involving patients with PTSD. Gold, 2023. Johnson, 2015, points out that these body-based metaphors are a consequence of the fact that understanding is not merely an abstract propositional reasoning process, but fundamentally involves embodied and emotional engagements in a way which constitutes our most basic way of being in and engaging with our surroundings in a deep, visceral manner. Johnson, 2015, page 1. Understanding, then, is not passively received, but actively engaged through the body. Following this, we can understand the body as playing a fundamental role in developing and processing emotions in therapeutic and psychedelic experiences. From facial expressions to body language, emotional interactions involve movements of the body which both communicate and co-create affective meaning. The therapeutic potential of these embodiments of emotional understanding have been extensively utilized in dance movement therapy, expanding the concept of the therapeutic to include nonverbal forms of expression, interaction, and communication. DMT engages the body's role in understanding and processing abstract emotions through the power of dance. The embodied movements of improvisatory dance have been argued to engage an embodied form of sense-making, which have been unjustly amputated from other forms of thinking and understanding. Merritt, 2015, Sheets Johnstone, 2015. By focusing on the experience of movement sensing and on how movement makes sense, Koch and Fishman, 2011, page 64, DMT represents an approach to psychotherapy consonant with embodied and enactive views of cognition. Turning to the festival context, we can now better understand the emphasis on dance to facilitate therapeutically beneficial psychedelic transformation. This is nothing unique to festivals, as dance can be observed as a critical component of psychedelic ritual settings across various cultural contexts, Tramaci, 2013, and thus provides opportunities for new cross-cultural translation of psychedelic practices, which emphasize the foundational role of the body. By creating spaces which facilitate movement, the festival setting offers attendees opportunities for embodied forms of emotional catharsis and processing through dance. The rhythms of the dance floor afford new explorations of the emotional landscape of their psychedelic experience through the movements of the body it evokes. A shuffle of the feet or a swing of the hips may, for example, act to provide a lived experience of emerging from the stuck feeling reported by patients with PTSD in psychedelic therapy, Koch et al. 2012. Dancing then offers an immediate way to engage embodied meaning-making of psychedelic experience. These in-the-moment, embodied, and affective forms of engagement may also help ease the integration process of psychedelic experiences, which resist the linguistic description which traditional forms of therapy rely upon. Baji et al. 2022. The fluid, non-linear meaning often found in psychedelic states and their integration aligns with the emergent and relational meaning expressed and explored in dance improvisation. Merritt, 2015, Hermans, 2023, allowing for non-propositional forms of psychedelic integration and expression of experience. By confining the psychedelic experience to an immobile posture on a hospital bed, the setting of the clinical trial misses the multitude of opportunities to facilitate and integrate therapeutically transformative psychedelic experience through DMT. Yet the neglect of the role of the body can not only be observed in the position of the body itself, but also the stimuli curated to guide the psychedelic experience. Both the festival and clinical setting observe the significant role music plays in guiding psychedelic experience. Kalin et al. 2018, Lehigh 2023, Mosina and Michael 2024, but utilize it in very different ways, and it is these which we will turn to next. DJ Midwife. Although the clinical trial attempted to curate a musical playlist unfettered by prior associations, Kalin et al. 2018, p3, this presupposes a neutrality that art, at its very foundation, resists in its being deeply relational and associative. Barths 2010, Bakhtin 2011. The question then becomes what associations the researchers unintentionally projected into their musical curation as a result of this attempt at meaning muting in search of objectivity. The clinical trial created a preset playlist which contained ambient, classical, and other harmonic and melodic-based compositions in order to guide the patient's psychedelic experience towards so-called peak and mystical experiences. Kalin et al. 2018, p4, at R. Carhart-Harris 2024. This guidance was unidirectional, meaning that a preconceived notion of what constitutes transformative psychedelic experience was selected and imposed through the curation of the music. In other words, by selecting music in ambient and classical styles and organizing it with a pre-onset, onset, building towards peak, re-entry and return, Kalin et al. 2018, p4, compositional form, both a musical and meaning-making structure was imposed on the subject. This involved a preconception of the centrality of a mystical experience, and subsequently the curation of a specific quality of experience, which conformed to the researchers' assumptions of what essentially constitutes therapeutically transformative psychedelic experience. Greer 2025. Yet this is by no means the only way, both in its imposition of musical style and predefined conception of psychedelic experience. Turning to the festival setting, we can observe a field of musically embodied research which rivals that of the most devoted academics. The role of sonic selector is often given sacred status in the festival space as a result of the role of music in guiding psychedelic experience. Hudson, 1999. The DJs who take up the duty of this role spend as much time researching, reviewing, and recombining sonic material as an academic would scholarly material, and this is for good reason. Different qualities of music evoke different qualities in the body-mind. Deshane, 2002, Lemon and Moss, 2015. The deep rhythms of psytrance, techno, and dubstep move the listening dancer to spaces of psychedelic experience inaccessible with more harmony-heavy styles. Through an awareness of this musical diversity, the DJ possesses a sophisticated sonic expertise and thus skills of bringing forth embodied and emotional experiences through musical curation. Landau, 2013. This ultimately provides a scaffolding upon which embodied forms of transformative psychedelic experience can grow. Yet, unlike the preconception which necessitates the pre-selection of music seen in the clinical context, the DJ's guidance is not imposed unidirectionally but emerges in communal coordination with the dancing crowd. Like a medical practitioner, Mull 2002, the DJ's knowledge set is a relational one, which involves navigating between various forms of embodiment, with their job not to pre-select music and play to the crowd, but responsively play along with the experiences communicated through the dancing bodies of the crowd. Gerard, 2013. DJs synchronize their sonic guidance with the jumbled entanglement of dancing bodies before them, letting the agency expressed through the crowd's embodiment guide their own psychedelically guiding track selection process. The art of the DJ is one of interacting rhythmic loops between records and other records, between dancers and other dancers, and between the record's loops and the loopy dancers. Rietveld, 2013. As a result, the application of the DJ's expertise in the multitude of embodied experiences to be musically evoked is ultimately led by the dancing experiencer who is being guided by their music. The DJ follows the dancer who follows the DJ, and the record spins round and round. In this way, the DJ acts to assist one in bringing forth an embodied psychedelic experience through music and dance, to assist one in the birth of their own psychedelic embodiment. Yet the dancer is never alone, but engulfed in a sweaty sea of dancing bodies. Therefore, the DJ not only weaves various embodied experiences together within an individual, but also the experiences of individual dancers together with each other, and thus is also the mediator of the birth of a social bond. In this way, the DJ also assists in bringing together experiences, interanimating the embodied experiences of the dancers with each other and with the rhythms they seamlessly synchronize in their whirling from record to record. This simultaneous bringing forth and bringing together experiences of psychedelic embodiment makes the DJ's role much like that of the midwife. They guide the simultaneous birth of both embodiment and relation. A midwife not only oversees the birth of an embodied child, but also the birth of a family dynamic, each born out of each other. They interactively know when to push the energy and when to provide space. Through the intermingling application of their knowledge set, they facilitate the emergence of an embodied experience simultaneously as individuated as it is relational. DJ Midwife masterfully through these musical moments of this simultaneous inter- and intra-bodily birth. They guide a process beginning from the relational embodiment of coming together, copulation, from which a body has grown within a larger, relating body, sparked by a love prior to its coming into being, kindled through an internal relation, and in the moment of the individuating emergence of this newborn body is also birthed a new relation, captured corporally in the caressing felt sense first contact of the skin. From embodiment emerges relation, emerges embodiment, ad infinitum. Moving mercurially from musical body to body in the mixing of records, and from dancing body to body in the merging of their dancing movements, the DJ relationally guides the emergence of an intersubjective psychedelic embodiment, birthed both by and into participation. Through this, dancers may experience themselves as this single coordinated being, a creature with 1,000 arms and eyes, making love with itself and reaching back as far as creation and forward to the very end of time. St. John 2013, p. 13. Vibing into voice. The dancer emerges and finds themselves in the intersubjective soup of the dance floor. Immersed in interaction, muddled bodies both move around and move them. Through watching others dance and dancing with others, the dancer gestates in this rhythmically unfolding social drama. Art Pradid 2023. Like fractaling polyrhythms, each dancer offers a unique encounter with the unifying pulse of the DJ's music. Enveloped in this ongoing collective embellishment, one is invited to develop their own conception of individuated embodiment, to find their own groove and bust a move. Surrounded by sociality, one comes to know new forms of expression through embodied exploration and the teaching actions of others sharing their situation and situated condition of embodiment. McGarry and Russo 2011. Like the newborn smiles and cries, the simple bodily actions of sways and conga lines evolve to engage more complex feelings and interactions. Just as the child's expressively squealing vocalizations take linguistic shape and thus allow navigation and communication of emotion with greater complexity, the interactive embodiment of the dance floor brings forth the vulnerably exploratory space required to develop extended techniques of articulating the simultaneous complexity of a rich inter- and intrapersonal life through movement. This space allows one to, without judgment, formulate a language of dance out of the babbling bodily movements of a novice, and through this newfound embodied understanding, explore and express their ongoing psychedelic experience. Also, like language, this exploratory embodiment always exists within community. The existence of both the innerness and outerness of worlds is dependent on a self embodied in the world with others. Merleau-Ponty, 2013. The embodied sense-making practices of festivals do not exist in isolation, but are structures one must participate in. This participation in community can be understood as a form of participatory sense-making, PSM, defined as the coordination of intentional activity in interaction, whereby individual sense-making processes are affected and new domains of social sense-making can be generated that were not available to each individual on her own. De Jager and DiPaolo, 2013, page 13. The development of our own conceptions of embodiment arising from this intersubjective sense-making space is eloquently explained through the example of a child's learning to point. Originally, pointing is only a simple but incomplete grasping movement directed towards a desired object. The child's failed reaching may provoke a helping reaction from the caregiver when she interprets the reaching movement as a kind of pointing gesture. In the thwarting of a goal, a gap opens up for potential new meaning. The individual reaching movement can then turn into a gesture for others. The meaning of reaching changes and develops into a new possibility for interacting with the social world, pointing. As we can see, the intention of pointing does not reside within the child's individual mind, but emerges as an outcome of their ongoing social interactions. Meanings and intentions may be formed not only individually, but arise through participatory sense-making. They are emergent products of interaction, and in many situations, they can be viewed as distributed phenomena rather than as individual, private mental acts or properties. Fuchs and Jager, 2009, page 480. The enactive and relational turn toward intersubjective meaning-making outlined by this approach has had far-reaching and relevant consequences for our present concerns. In the general clinical sphere, PSM has been applied to psychotherapeutic, Garcia 2021-2022, and psychiatric, Dehan 2020-2021 frameworks. This is of great use for future research, as the relationality it centralizes has been identified as a missing key component within the psychedelic clinical realm. Barnes 2022, Hauskeller 2022, Tempone-Wiltshire and Dowie 2023, Barnes and Briggs 2024. Following this relational call, enactive approaches have been proposed as fruitful frameworks to unpack the complexity of intersubjective interaction. Caporuscio and Kind, 2024, Melling and Scheidegger, 2023-2024. Perhaps most relevant for our purposes, though, is the wealth of literature examining PSM in dance practices. Trevarthen, 2020, Millard, 2020, Hermans, 2022a, 2022b, 2023. Group dance improvisations, like children's physical play, clearly illustrate the embodied and inactive forms of meaning-making described by PSM. This similarity with play can be seen in the highly playful dancing and wider social context of the festival setting, O'Grady 2012. Forming an intersubjective counterpart to the subjective forms of embodied understanding discussed previously, these practices of participatory dance allow for bodily resonance, affect attunement, and interactional synchrony, Hermans 2023, page 8, and thus present opportunities for collaborative application of PSM and DMT frameworks. Woven in the wobbles. When dancing bodies entangle, boundaries of selves become mutable and porous as action and reaction merge into a blurred distinction between actors. Leaning into and leading into each other, the felt sensing of bodies reach out to meet each other through their co-created sensing activity. Through this process of participating in each other's movement patterns, both dancers feel, through direct perception, the kinetic qualities of their own movement patterns and those of their partner. Summer-Ritter and Payne, 2013, page 146. A dance duet requires a simultaneous attunement to the bodily alignments of the other as well as oneself. Regulation of the duet is achieved by adjusting one's own impulses and adapting these to the dynamics of the interaction. Yet, at the same time, a dancer can experience intentionality and agency by differentiating from the shared movement quality into personal individual movement patterns. Summer-Ritter and Payne, 2013, page 145 to 146. This dance of adaptation and autonomy goes far beyond embodied movement, applying to the vast majority of our loving social relationships. De Jager, 2021. This simultaneous exercise in agency and attunement of affective and embodied action represents an example of kinesthetic intersubjectivity, KI. This can be found abundantly from improvisational dance dyads to the developmental dyads of caregiver and child. The intersubjective sharing of a goal in the child's bodily gesture of pointing and a dancer's gestural invitation to a duet are both clear examples of KI. The mutual incorporation, referring to the reciprocal interaction of two agents in which each lived body reaches out to embody the other, Fuchs and De Jager, 2009, page 474, involved in KI can be understood as a nonverbal, pre-representational form of connection. This is significant, as feelings of connectedness were identified as primary contributors to transformative psychedelic experiences in both clinical and festival settings. Watts et al., 2017, Lehigh, 2023, Mosina and Michael, 2024. From dance to development, PSM claims that it is out of this effectually driven relational action that one's conception of embodiment and selfhood arises and grows. Fuchs, 2017. Following this framing of a relationally unfolding self, we can better understand the emergence of self-transformations in psychedelic experience through PSM dance practices. By sharing movement, dancers sense each other's emotions and intentions in and through the body. Sheets Johnstone, 2011. This intersubjective resonance can be powerfully transformative in facilitating and intensifying the feelings of connection identified as therapeutically relevant in psychedelic experiences. Tar et al., 2016. Shared dance offers moments to build and rebuild an embodied, felt sense of relational trust and belonging. Prakash, 2023. This may take place at multiple scales, from the personal connection created by a dance duet to connection with the wider community via participation in the dancing body of the crowd. The embodied social connection present in dance has been used to facilitate intersubjective attunement in psychedelic practices across various cultural contexts, Tramaki, 2013, and thus provides another opportunity for engagement with non-Western psychedelic practices. Group dancing allows for intersubjective attunement, Fuchs and De Jager, 2009, Fuchs, 2017. This fosters relational feelings below the level of propositional description and gets closer to the root of feeling connected through interactively feeling, both tactically and emotionally, the embodiment of another. Acting at the level of felt sense, these embodied practices of connecting pre-propositionally are resonant with the conceptually evasive encounters found in psychedelic experiences. This offers opportunities for lived experience of being with and connecting to others through nonverbal activity during psychedelic experience, and helps to provide a concretely embodied and non-propositional aspect to these often ambiguously abstract experiences. Earlywine et al. 2022, Gren et al. 2023. Being able to explore, express, and relate without static concepts during these moments of elusive meaning-making provides a safe space to socially embrace their freaky self, St. John 2009, p47, and the weirdness, Davis 2019, of the liminality of self and other while immersed in the liminality of a psychedelically altered state of mind, O'Grady 2012, Vitos 2017, Kyriakopoulos 2021. This liminal dance gets to the root of one of the foundational insights which birthed 4E cognition. The body itself is liminal. It is neither fully subject nor object. It is not a fact or a sum of facts, material or spiritual. End quote. The flesh is not matter, is not mind, is not substance. To designate it, we should need the old term element, in the sense it was used to speak of water, air, earth, and fire. That is, in the sense of a general thing, midway between the spatio-temporal individual and the idea, a sort of incarnate principle that brings a style of being wherever there is a fragment of being. Merleau-Ponty, 1968, page 139. If the flesh is the elements, then the dance floor is their alchemical laboratory, a space of transmutation between the differentiating and undifferentiating of self and other, a space of intersubjective liminality. A freak show of friends, intersubjective liminality, Davis, 2008, calls the festival an incubator of novelty, a petri dish of possibility, where the future forms of community and consciousness are explored. Davis, 2008, page 54. In experiencing psychedelics in community, one opens up a range of opportunities to facilitate and strengthen various forms of felt sensing connectedness. In therapeutic situations where one is struggling with social connectedness, a psychedelic experience in a social setting, ripe with opportunities to actively experience and explore connection with others, seems preferable to a psychedelic experience in isolation, where one must integrate the insights pertaining to connectedness into the activity of their social lives after the fact. The festival setting utilizes Ki and PSM through its simultaneous independence and entanglement of agencies, interacting through body, dance, music, and socialization. This allows it to achieve a form of intersubjective liminality. This can be understood as an interpersonal equivalent of ego dissolution, which is afforded by the social quality of the festival setting. If ego dissolution creates an individual liminality in one's subjective sense of self, Noor et al. 2016, which has been observed as being synergistic with feelings of connectedness, Kaluzna et al. 2022, and if intersubjectivity is a liminal space between two individual subjects retaining agency and their shared collectivity, then intersubjective liminality implies a liminal space somewhere between these two. In other words, it is one thing to lose yourself to the trip and another to lose yourself to dance with another, but it is something profoundly more to be lost in these simultaneously and dance between various forms of selflessness and subsequent selfings. These moments of liminal identification between self and non-self may help to facilitate and deepen experiences of connectedness, which involves both self and non-self and exists somewhere between them. Through the dissolution of individual selves, one's getting lost in the movements of the community, a relational process of selfing arises, one's becoming, bringing forth the community through participation, which births a self metamorphosed through social connection, one's being moved by and moving of the community. Emerging in this liminal space between subjective and intersubjective is a psychedelic sense of self, which confounds common categories through a deterritorialization of the hermeneutic process and swiftly transmutes their semiotics with the entwining trickster tongue of a Deleuzian Hermes. The embodiment of this intersubjective liminality is to participate in the creature with 1,000 arms and eyes, making love with itself and reaching back as far as creation and forward to the very end of time, St. John 2013, p. 13, and its description resists propositionalization in much the same way descriptions of psychedelic experiences do. Coping with the chaos of intersubjective liminality. This transformational dance of intersubjective liminality is not always pretty. Everyday confrontations with either oneself or others can already get messy, so a dosed crowd of people confronting both themselves and each other simultaneously explodes in its combinatorial complexity. Krippendorf, 2010. Explorations across the spectrum of human experience and expression can be both observed and indulged at the drop of a mad hat. Joys, terrors, impossible fantasies, and claims of ultimate truth, all dancing in between and together with one another as their threads tumble to form the tattered tassels of a tumultuous tapestry of trippers. This creates a level of complexity which borders on chaos, but such is the organizational form of a diverse community. Being so messy, the beat of this bizarre of the bizarre is easy to get lost in. Psychonautic dancers, still learning their limits, sometimes overexert themselves with both dance and substances, need adjustment of technique to avoid injury, or hold hidden traumas in their muscles and minds. Festival settings utilize a solution hidden in plain sight to deal with the messiness of experiencing psychedelics in community. The lack of control inherent not only to social but also psychedelic experiences is embraced and engaged through distributed practices of looking after the physical and emotional well-being of the community as a community. This is accomplished through a combination of emergent and pre-given roles. These roles could emerge from spontaneous interaction, such as reading someone's body language and asking if they need water or a hug, or be pre-given, such as friendships or services like PsyCare, with professionals trained to help others manage challenging psychedelic experiences. Lehigh 2023, Mosina and Michael 2024. Thus, in effectively coping with the challenges of engaging communal psychedelic use through the strengths of community, festival settings are able to leverage the benefits of exploring psychedelic experience in emergent social settings. Friand, one who loves although. Comprehensive analysis of the complexity of the participatory social setting of festivals far exceeds the scope of this work. A key contributing factor in its structure and beneficial therapeutic effects warrants investigation. Friendship. One of the most fundamental pre-given relationships in the festival setting is that which one previously has with the people who they embark on the journey of the festival with. This group of friends travels, camps, cooks, dances, explores, and trips through the festival together, forming a basic social nucleus often referred to as one's personal festival rave fam or family. At Mystic Vision 2023. Others, outside this basic nucleus, befriended at previous festivals, as well as others presently yet to be friended, are also treated with the closeness of familial connection, with this extended familial community often referred to as a festival family, sci-fi family, N.D. We can begin to better understand the DJ's comparability with the DJ's overseeing of the birth of a family dynamic when considering this invocation of family dynamics to describe the close social relations found in the festival setting. The role of friends has been identified as an often overlooked but significant factor in the therapeutic process. Jordan et al. 1991, Jordan 2018, Guggenheim 2023. Therefore, the compounding companionship of the festival setting provides a strong foundation for therapeutically beneficial experiences of social connectedness through friendship. We can think of the pre-given role of these friendships as a form of rehearsed dance, with shared stories, jokes, costumes, emotions, and experiences forming a repertoire of relational engagement. This results in a personal familiarity which is deeply beneficial during psychedelic experiences. The time-refined intimate knowledge of each other's personalities, past, preferences, pleasures, pains, and forms of processing and projecting these is a critical component of guiding one through experiences where psyche manifests its many facets. Being surrounded by familiar people who are also familiar with oneself creates a space of socio-emotional safety and trust. This was also observed as significant in the clinical trial through the creation of personal rapport and the choice of open and accepting therapeutic approaches. However, a therapeutic relationship facilitates a different kind of feeling of safety and trust than friendship, given its professional dynamic and limited temporal structure. While possessing certain benefits, the connection formed through the hours of rapport building with therapists seen in the clinical trial cannot expect to attain the same quality as the months and years spent developing close friendships. Jordan et al. 1991, Jordan 2018. A close friend knows the fundamentals: how one moves when they're in a funk, how they get funky when their inhibitions are removed, how they function and have fun, and thus how to better synchronize with both their friend's flaws and flourishing. Being surrounded by people practiced at understanding one personally creates a social setting in which opportunities for psychedelic experiences of connectedness are significantly more potent, as it creates a setting in which pre-existing connection and understanding can be actively witnessed via the witnessing presence of friends. Like dancing with familiar partners, being surrounded by trusted loved ones creates opportunities for lived experiences of friendship during psychedelic experiences, which can act to amplify the therapeutically transformative feelings of connectedness facilitated by them. The same is the case when one helps their friends, as when one sees, knows, and feels that they make an impact on another, they feel less alone, and this helps them to move out of isolation into connection. Duffy and Samodi, 2011, page 227. This mutual empathy is at the very root of friendship, and friendship, in all its sweetness and strain, is often one of our most fundamental sources of feelings of connection. Fair, 1996. Wallen and Lockman, 2000. The rehearsed movements of friendship also provide the sense of consistency and familiarity, which may not only aid one in their psychedelic experiences, but also the experience of being in a crowd of thousands of strangers, made all the more strange by psychedelics. Yet the crowd is only presently full of strangers, for it is also full of opportunities to make splendidly strange friends. The carnivalesque chaos of the festival setting facilitates a social spontaneity, which we can think of as a kind of improvised dance. An inadvertent bump of bodies can momentarily morph a neighbor into a dance partner. A most minute meeting of eyes can quickly move to the mouth in a smile and a hello. A change in the DJ's genre can simultaneously shift oneself and another, and being both participatorily possessed by the beat, share in the joy of each other's simultaneous ecstatic reaction. Just as in improvised dance, the incidental may lead to the intentional, so these unexpected encounters present an opportunity for uniquely emergent meaning-making moments of PSM. These spontaneous acts of connection often act as the catalyzing seeds for further deep connections from festival family to lifelong friends and even future partners and parents. Yet many remain as nameless kind faces with whom one briefly shared an intimate moment of human connection. Davis, 2005. The unpredictability of these random encounters adds a sense of surprised excitement to the social connection process, which is only possible through the chaotic environment of the festival. This unpredictable emergence of social connection is resonant with the volatile quality of the emergence of emotions and insights in psychedelic experience. Bajay et al., 2022. The pattern of thought-breaking pleasant surprise of a spontaneous connection is only possible due to the emergent quality of the festival's chaos and cannot be contained by the controlled, predictable clinical environment. These widespread opportunities for spontaneous moments of connection adds another layer to the previously described effect which being surrounded by friends has on feelings of connection. In being constantly surrounded by both friends and potential friends and engaging repeatedly in practices of connection building with friends and strangers, one can facilitate and develop feelings of trust and connection with their personal festival family as well as the wider festival community. Through these multiple layers of social connectedness, the festival environment helps to amplify and articulate the feelings of deep connection identified as therapeutically transformative in the clinical trial and festival setting. Watts et al., 2017, Newson et al., 2021, Mosina and Michael, 2024. The opportunities for making and deepening friendships, witnessing and being witnessed, and being and letting be which festivals present can be understood as offering a multi-layered form of communitas. Turner, 1991. The centrality of communitas in rave and festival settings has been extensively discussed in regards to music therapy, Rill, 2006, spirituality, St. John, 2013, and psychedelic use, Tramaci, 2000. It has also been observed contributing significantly to feelings of connectedness in psychedelic group settings. Kettner et al. 2021, Gizan 2024, Rose 2025. One study participant, describing the benefit of the communal psychedelic ritual setting, explained that it allowed them to realize they are just part of a larger human family who has this collective mind. And you realize, because of that, you know that when you think it's only you fighting your battles, you realize actually you're part of a larger tapestry. Rose 2025, page 9. Integrating communal practices into psychedelic therapy also allows for deepened engagements with indigenous practices in which community plays a central role, Urrutia et al. 2023, and helps to combat the colonial erasure of non-dominant knowledge sources within psychedelic studies, Fotio 2019, Enns 2021, Williams et al. 2022, Devanote et al. 2022, Seladwin et al. 2023. Connection as counter-alienation. No matter the intensity or outcome, the festival is fertile with friendliness, offering many a reprieve from the isolated and cold conditions of contemporary life. In the course of day-to-day living, many are left stranded by social structures, where one avoids eye contact on public transportation, passes by hundreds of souls daily without a moment of mutual acknowledgement, and lacks opportunities to authentically witness, know, and love people and all the creativity, stories, and wisdom they bring. Clinical psychotherapy and Western medicine more generally are not exempt from responsibility in perpetuating these alienating, House-Keller 2022, Sanabria and Toffoli 2024, Colonial, Langlitz 2013, Hertzberg and Butler 2019, Dumit and Sanabria 2022, Herrera 2023, and other dominating social structures. Therefore, through its entanglement with psychotherapy and Western medicine practices, psychedelic therapy also risks perpetuating these structures. George et al. 2019, Sanchez-Petrament 2023, Rajwani 2025. This need not be the case, however, and 4E cognitive approaches have already been identified in discussions of how to decolonize conceptions of mind in psychedelic studies. Savoldi and Roazi 2024. Perhaps the most obvious example of this is the isolation of patients in hospital rooms for psychedelic sessions. Although this avoids the chaos which complicates controlled scientific research, it clearly alienates one from the web of relations which they rely upon. This is inconsistent not only with various highly developed indigenous practices, which implicitly involve this web of relations, Tramaci 2013, Williams et al. 2022, Savoldi and Roazi 2024, but also the very findings of the clinical researchers themselves. Being that connectedness was found to be one of the leading factors in treatment results, Watts et al. 2017, and that connection is definitionally antithetical to isolation and alienation, neglecting the powerful role of this web of relations in psychedelic experience while emphasizing its ability to facilitate connectedness is conceptually incoherent. Lovingly letting be. One might argue that the clinical psychedelic setting allows for interior journeys, as it allows one to focus their attention inwards, Kalin et al. 2018, p2, and experience connection felt through senses somewhere behind the being-brain barrier. It could be said that the therapists are simply letting the patient be during their psychedelic experience, in that they only intervene to check in or provide support when asked, Carhart-Harris et al. 2016. Yet this ignores the potential for experience to be shared intersubjectively and engaged via lived connection. To leave a person in psychedelic solitude and describe it as letting them be contrasts sharply with McLaren's 2002 conception of letting be. What then does it mean to know through this kind of letting be? Although the usual cognitive psychological suspects, e.g. language, mathematics, planning, decision-making, often hog the spotlight of research into human knowing, De Jager, 2021, claims that in reality our most sophisticated knowing is full of indetermination, inconsistencies, vagueness, and contradictions. We use forms of knowing which involve these in the majority of our personal, social, and environmental engagements, which are too often overlooked in scientific contexts. What about how we learn to trust, how to tell quality from quackery, how to know when to strike, what to be outraged about, how to teach, how to grow old, or how to say what we mean? What about all the things we do that are not based on an objective, discretizing logic, but on a living, lived logic? De Jager, 2021, p. 849. To let one be in this sense means to actively attune and support the unfolding of another's becoming without over-determining or over-defining them. She claims that the most familiar place we can look to for examples of this kind of knowing by letting be is in our loving relationships, whose intersubjective dance is a never-ending balancing act between the ongoing being and becoming of lover and loved. De Jager, 2021, p. 850. When we come to know a person we love, be they a friend, partner, or child, they are determined in part by themselves, their own being, and in part by the knower's being, her situation, motivations, interests. They are never fully self-determined and never fully other-determined, always dialectically evolving between determinations. De Jager, 2021, p. 859. She continues, loving is not growing into one, nor growing separate, all while having no choice but to follow and navigate between precisely these opposing tendencies. These tendencies, towards symbiosis and towards separation, play out continually in loving relationships. To love is to navigate the various tensions between the tendencies and directions of one's own becoming, the other's, and that of the relation. De Jager, 2021, p. 861. What then does it mean to know through the letting be of loving? It begins in connection and unfolds out of the relating of knower and known. One wishes to know the other and the other them, and thus their psyches begin to dance. The knower wishes to know because they do not yet know, yet no matter how much more they know, they can never comprehend the known fully. What they wish to know grows, keeps changing, dances differently, and the knower themselves do too as a result. Knowing and not knowing are intertwined. Knower and known are ongoingly becoming in any case, each in their own developments. But when they meet in the relation of knowing, their becoming is particularized by this very relation. De Jager, 2021, page 864. After this, they may walk separate paths, but they will forever walk differently, being changed by this encounter of knowing and being known. This is the kind of epistemological, ethical, and ontological stance from which I believe a science of psychedelic connection must be approached. This knowing through lovingly letting be is the kind of knowing which the festival setting facilitates. The simultaneous presence of a loving environment resulting in transformative realizations described by festival participants, Lehi 2023, Messina and Michael 2024, is then in line with de Jager's claim that loving and knowing go hand in hand. At festivals, one actively knows and is known by others, lets and is let be through active participation, and via this mutual witnessing, mutual transformation occurs. Through participation in the intersubjective liminality of the festival landscape via encounters with dance and sociality, one participates in the PSN practices of psychedelic communitas. The shared meaning-making activities and meaningful moments provided by this social setting allows for mutual coordination of sense-making practices, while also retaining one's individual autonomy via letting be. The dance of witnessing another and being moved by them, just as they witness you and thus too are moved, is the mutually beneficial medicine of community. Through the psychedelic symbiosis of these spontaneous and sustained soul-felt encounters, an ecosystem of engagements emerges, which is the community of the psychedelic festival. The festival setting can then be understood as a curation and celebration of the diversity of psyche which manifests and flourishes when it is actively let be. Yet, the festival is also set in a setting which could equally fit this description, and it is that which we will journey into next. Toward a symbiotic science of psychedelic ecologic, the setting of the festival's set and setting. When we zoom out even further and observe the environment which this social festival environment is embedded within, we find a similarly seeming chaotic pattern. Festivals are often held within natural environments, Gilmore 2010, Vitos 2017, and thus also engage in a process of letting be with the festival's other-than-human attendees in both theory and practice, Cusack and Norman 2012. This incorporates the tendency toward increased nature relatedness observed in the clinical trial, Lyons and Carhart-Harris 2018, into the foundation of the festival's psychedelic set and setting. Simply put, if psychedelics can increase nature relatedness and are also reciprocally influenced by set and setting, Eisner 1997, Hartog Zones 2017-2022, then actively experiencing psychedelics in natural settings will facilitate extended nature relatedness, Luke 2013, Kettner et al. 2019. This is resonant with claims that we come to know and love nature not through detached contemplation, but through embodied activity within it. Scott et al. 2014, Lumber et al. 2017, Candiato 2022, Richardson et al. 2022. It has been hypothesized that nature relatedness utilizes similar skills as and works in synchrony with inter- and intrapersonal relating processes, following observations that higher levels of personal bodily awareness and secure attachment style correlated with increased nature relatedness. Branham 2024. Following this, the previously described embodied and social aspects of the festival setting may amplify the feelings of nature relatedness brought on by actively exploring nature. This symbiosis of connection between others and nature via embodied activity reflects Manning's 2009 claim that every movement is not simply of the body, but moves with the associated milieu of the body-world nexus that enfolds it. Reaching toward can be a trip as much as it can be a touch. Manning 2009, page 45. One might claim that research in these natural settings would lack the conditions needed for controlled scientific research. However, conditions like placebo, which are normally avoided and controlled for, can work hand in hand with set and setting. Hartogsohn 2016. Schleim 2022, and so clinging to the comfortable control of the clinic room ignores the wealth of opportunities to substantially integrate set and setting into psychedelic therapy. Why then do some cling to control so tightly? From the construction to exploration of the festival grounds, one finds that the creation and navigation of the psychedelic social ecosystem of the festival takes place within a wider, natural ecosystem, also filled with a dance of diverse forms of life. Contrasting the organization of urban life and its linear architecture of bricks, roads, and orthogonal walls are forests and deserts with their crooked stones, uneven paths, and deadwood detritivore dwellings. Here, entropy and syntropy converge and move to a syncopated rhythm of life too often overlooked by the gridded 4x4 rhythms found amongst the blocked cities and schedules of post-industrialized living. Cubicles and cubic architecture reflect an aversion to the messiness of diversity, too often sidelined for agenda-seeking profitable order by maintaining monocultures, from Monsanto to MAGA, Brecca et al. 2014, Ting 2015, Boeing 2019, Rondinell Oviedo and Kina 2025, Cox and O'Connor 2025. This results in an alienation of human beings, both from their embedding environment and from each other. Harvey 2014, Rogema 2023. Understanding this, festivals have sought out spaces in which nature has been, for the most part, let be, in order to build their spaces of letting be. The messy home of Mother Nature makes managing the wiring of huge sound systems and sanitation of human waste challenging without power lines and plumbing, but the imaginative solutions of production teams and porta potties engage a mutual letting be with both the festival and natural environment's needs. Through this mutual incorporation, the festival integrates its communally chaotic identity with the creatively chaotic quality of its ecosystemic container. In doing this, the feelings of connectedness with other people described above and observed in the clinical studies can connect with and mutually reinforce feelings of connection and relation to nature, also observed in the same trial, Watts et al. 2017, Lyons and Carhart-Harris 2018. Recreation of clinical psychedelic setting produced for press release, Imperial College London 2021. The above image published by the ICL team on their website speaks volumes. It clearly shows an awareness of the importance of natural environments in the setting of psychedelic experiences, seen in the tarp with the forest image. However, as can also be clearly seen, the true four-cornered white walls of the controlled hospital setting is still visibly present. The soft hue of the salt lamp light only mimics the tactile warmth of the sunshine, and the hard-edged equipment is revealed by the white fluorescence which truly illuminates the room. The love of control and fear of its loss to chaos only allow for an imitation of the healing potential of being in nature via a two-dimensional parp, a demiurgic shadow on a wall. There may indeed be situations where this kind of inward journey would be therapeutically beneficial, yet if this remains the only option for psychedelic therapy and the singular setting presented to one is to remain still and in darkness, psychedelic subjects are mandated to remain clinically chained to the straight white, male walls of dominating frameworks. This framework of control presents an epistemological monopoly on the process of defining psychedelic experiences, dominating the discourse and deeming what is acceptable through its proscriptions and proscriptions, thus enforcing wider power structures. One's natural embedding is something that must be actively observed. To see its pleroma requires one to get up and take a walk amongst the world, considering the clinic's hidden set, dualistic fears of nature's living chaos. A vast array of dominating and detached frameworks influencing the clinical setting share a common theme. The domination of both nature and humans requires a rationale which excludes on the basis of a dualistic structure of self and other. The same basic structures of self, which appear in the treatment of nature as lifeless instrument, also underlie the rational egoism and instrumentalism of the market, the treatment of those supposedly less possessed of reason as inferior and as instruments for their more civilized Western neighbors, as in slavery, colonialism, and racism, and the treatment of women as inferior others whose norms of virtue embody a thinly disguised instrumentalism. Plumwood, 2002. 143. Combating this requires a fundamental shift in conception of the external world, viewing it not as a non-agentive object or invisible background conditions against which the foreground achievements of reason or culture, provided typically by the white Western male expert or entrepreneur, take place. It is to be defined as a terra nullius, a resource empty of its own purposes or meanings, and hence available to be annexed for the purposes of those supposedly identified with reason or intellect, and to be conceived and molded in relation to these purposes. It means being seen as part of a sharply separate, even alien lower realm, whose domination is simply natural, flowing from nature itself and the natures of things. Plumwood, 2002, page 4. Plumwood goes on to suggest embracing both continuity and difference in such a way that the other as neither alien to and discontinuous from self, nor assimilated to or an extension of self. Plumwood, 2002, page 6. Following the embodied and social practices resonant with this suggestion described in the previous sections, how might one go about exploring this relational connection of self and environment in science? The first step in solving a problem is often admitting there is one. Frank et al. 2024 calls this problem and its lack of admittance the blind spot of science. Just as one's vision is blind to their optic nerve, there too is something unacknowledged which allows for science: felt, bodily, lived experience. They claim the attempt to neutralize lived experience in science is unwise, as we cannot ignore our own experience of being alive when we seek to comprehend the phenomenon of life. Frank et al. 2024, px. When the measure of temperature by degrees of Fahrenheit and Celsius is prioritized over degrees of warmth and cold, we miss the precondition of observation, investigation, exploration, measurement, and justification, which is our lived experience. The universe and the scientist who seeks to know it become lifeless abstractions. Frank et al. 2024, p. 13, 16. Even the crowned jewel of these scientific emperors with no clothes, which is the objective observer, is an abstraction of the living, embodied human beings behind them, as lived experience precedes the separation of knower and known, observer and observed. Frank et al. 2024, p. 20. This knowing is also always situated in a scientific community of awareness. Thus, when the powerful and prestigious are confused with the wise, many may ignore empirical evidence out of fear of a hermeneutic misstep leading to humiliation, and thus result in a foolish playing along with the naked fact of the delusion of absolute knowledge. Frank et al. 2024, p. 22. Can they awaken from the immature fantasy that the objectivizing dream of their singular perspective is the only one? Can they grow and explore with the science of children's wide-eyed wondering observational method and the poetic presentation and propositions of their literature? Is this experience excluding science the only way to do science? Could we not participatorily probe reality? Our culture's grand scientific narratives about the origin and structure of the universe and the nature of life and the mind are tales we tell, often good ones at that, and thus they constitute a modern form of mythos. They are the stories that orient us and structure our understanding of the world. Frank et al. 2024, page 14. There is no view from nowhere, no goddess-eyed point of view from which we can stand sure-footedly, witness nature, and judge it with the utmost certainty. We come to know life as a participant observer. The stories we tell are always in our own voice. How then to narrate this story? By beginning with the awareness that it is always our story, our science, our own experience, singing a tune as we interact in the world. The question then becomes, what stories will we tell? In any case, we do not own them. However many creative liberties we take, these stories are always being passed down. The peopled and other than peopled world tells us a story too, and so our science is also always the world's science, an expression of how the world interacts with us. Science strives to be a self-correcting narrative. A successful scientific narrative is made from the world and our experience of it evolving together. Frank et al. 2024, page XV. How then to go about unfolding the joint speech of this narration of and with nature? One method of going about it is to simply take the time to go about and drift as a form of dwelling. In other words, there is an exploratorily experimental method in the joy of journeying and viewing life as an adventure. Ingold, 2021, makes the case that this mobile method is closest to our mode of being, claiming, to be, I would now say, is not to be in place, but to be along paths. The path and not the place is the primary condition of being, or rather of becoming. Ingold, 2021, page 12. To exclude movement in our conception of being catches the body in cultural freeze frame. The point of explanatory departure is a pinpointing, a 0 point of stasis. When positioning of any kind comes a determining first, movement comes a problematic second. Masumi, 2021, page 3. The festival setting embraces this implicitly through dance as well as its selection of natural locations which require extended journeys to attend. Gilmore, 2010, Vitos, 2017. The limited temporal structure adds liminality to the location itself, also making the festival a kind of traveler. The festival grounds move upon and through the ground which nature provides. Thus, the attendee travels to and within a transient place. Their psychedelic moments manifest in a place which only momentarily manifests. The dominating dualisms and conception of a being as static, leading to the immobilization of the subject described above, are reflected in both the theory and method found in the clinical trial. The emphasis on the control of the setting reflects the view of one's relation to their environment as static and lifeless, thus making it capable of being comprehensively controlled. The fixed roles of therapist-patient and the fixed bodily posture reflect a view of the subject as only in and not moving in its embedding environment, and therefore also with and through other beings. These rigid frameworks and bodily posture reinforce the detached, objectifying view of self and thus self-other relation, whose alienating tendencies may well be at the root of the lack of connection which psychedelics have been shown to therapeutically mitigate. In other words, why only prioritize symptom reduction and not also embrace practices of preventative medicine? Frameworks rooted in action amongst the environment helps to remedy an individualistic bias, Cummins and DeJesus 2016. Consequently, Ingold reconceives the concept of dwelling as being embarked upon a movement along a way of life. The perceiver-producer is thus a wayfarer, and the mode of production is itself a trailblazed or a path followed. Ingold 2021, page 12. When one sets out on a journey, they compose a tale scripted by their scampering feet. They unfold their own story to find their spines stitched to countless other odysseys of leg and landbound legends. In this storied world, things do not exist, they occur. Where things meet, occurrences intertwine, as each becomes bound up in the other's story. To know someone or something is to know their story, and to be able to join that story to one's own. Ingold 2021, page 160 to 161. What happens then when we listen closely and let nature tell its stories? Immersed in the diverse, one wanders through an eco-social symphony of sensory and sensing activity, and may come to find that nature and culture are in mutual movement into and through each other. Massam, 2021, p. 11. Squirrels attend to the autumn pine's nut harvest as the farmer in the orchard. Birds build nests with the meticulous lumberwork of a carpenter. The beaver corps of engineers transform trunks into durable dams, which weave rivers into new wetlands. The dendritic growth of trees waltzes with waves of wind and swings to the photosynthesic samba of the sun, as the branch palm clasp of an old primate friend reprises the hereditary hora of their evolutionary interrelation. Letting these beings be, one attends to them and finds them being in a way not dissimilar from our own human style of being. Mars and Bronstein, 2018. In letting nature be, one comes to see that nature too is letting them be, it being the maternal material ground allowing for their existence. Encompassing them is a living socio-ecological web with a complexity that pushes pattern-seeking perception past its limits, ever arranging beyond our ability to comprehensively systematize. The dancing body of nature is a body populated by multiplicities, Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, p. 51, and an artful articulation of its biomorphing boogie can be found in the rhizomatic rhythms of two madmen with a modular synth without presets. Moving monadically to the beat of its bewilderingness is Deleuze and Guattari's Body Without Organs, BWO, Deleuze and Guattari, 1994, 2007, it being What Remains When You Take Everything Away, Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, p. 5. 172. This is not an empty body stripped of organs, but a body upon which that which serves as organs, wolves, wolf eyes, wolf jaws, is distributed. Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, page 51. Resembling the previously stated theories appealing to knowing through a love strung in between, de Jager, 2021, and the development of our subjective embodiment arising out of an embodied intersubjectivity, Fuchs and de Jager, 2009, Sommeriter and Payne, 2013, they claim that whenever someone makes love, really makes love, that person constitutes a body without organs, alone and with the other person or people, de Jager and Guattari, 2007, page 51. They go on to describe love for another as finding that person's own pax, the multiplicities he or she encloses within himself or herself, which may be of an entirely different nature. To join them to mine, to make them penetrate mine, and for me to penetrate the other person's. Heavenly nuptials, multiplicities of multiplicities. Every love is an exercise in depersonalization on a body without organs yet to be formed, and it is at the highest point of this depersonalization that someone can be named, receives his or her family name or first name, acquires the most intense discernibility in the instantaneous apprehension of the multiplicities belonging to him or her, and to which he or she belongs. Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, page 56. In this way, the BWO of nature, of love, is what breaks us as well as births us. With binary categorizations of entropy and order blown to bits by this deluge of diffusivity, one finds not chaos as we normally understand it, but rather a beautifully interwoven dance of many layered interactions, a cosmos so confounding it appears as chaos when compared with the cubic tendencies of our constructions and conceptions. This eco-chaos is an undefined definer, dynamically emerging out of its own processes, swallowed by its own genesis like the oroboric loops of the DJ's beats, the messy, fertile ground of Mother Nature from which life rises and into which it inevitably falls. Wildflower power. The overprescription of ordering processes, the stratifications of Deleuze and Guattari, disrupts the dance of these creatively saturated spaces of symbiosis and causes ecological catastrophe scaling from local to climatic. Actively being in nature and letting it be allows one to expand their concerns to include their relations with the other than human, Abram 1988, 1997, 2018, impelling the protection of them, Kimmerer 2013. Though it may now be common to recognize the importance of letting natural spaces be so that humans and other than humans can actively experience them, this was not always the case. Throughout the history of Western industrial culture, nature has often been conceptualized as a chaotic force which must be mastered, controlled, and dominated, Marx 2000, substantiated by wider dualistic tendencies in Western thought, Plumwood 2002. In the late 19th century, as industrial needs for lumber, minerals, and agricultural land colonized and destroyed more and more ecosystems and their peoples, many saw no issue, as they perceived these spaces as only material resources and not spaces of human and other than human life, Cronin and Demos 2003. Many saw a wild to be feared, others saw profit to be extracted, yet where most saw chaos, a few saw something else, beauty. Being in nature and letting it be, they found a balance amongst the trees, rivers, mountains, and deserts which their psyche, soul, could not find in the controlled cabins, concrete condos, and channel-chained canals of industrialized living. Re-inhabited rhapsodically, this allows one to feel a shared kinship with the aliveness and enliveningness of nature and its other-than-human inhabitants, with its ensouledness often most effectively expressed through stanza and story, Matthews 2012. These early advocates' arguments for the value and conservation of these natural spaces confounded many who held views of nature as uncontrolled chaos to be tamed through scientific advancement, but their voices won out in the battle to set these natural places apart as protected, sacred ground. Key amongst these early advocates was John Muir, part wandering experimental scientist, part mystical mountain poet. Muir could be said to be a truly fearless traveler. In his time, even the most adventurous of his peers would bring massive amounts of clothes, shelter, food, and guns to protect them from the elements, animals, and people their colonial body minds so feared when venturing into nature. Muir was different. He would travel into the mountains for months at a time, bringing only small amounts of bread and tea and otherwise sustaining his body from the land. Never thought of even bringing so much as a blanket in the freezing late falls of the snowy High Sierra, slept under logs, climbed trees in storms to feel the winds push his body to its limits as it pushes theirs, charged at bears to embody their knowledge of charging, climbed out over 1,000-foot waterfalls to learn their songs, and never carried a gun into the places he would go on to dedicate his life protecting. Burns 2009, Worcester 2011, Merriam 2021. He would embody the experience of the peaks of mountains in a flowing and relationally trusting fashion, such as adventures where, while clambering up crumbling battlements of metamorphic rock, hammering off ice with stones, Muir eventually found himself in an impossible spot, spread-eagled against a smooth cliff face, unable to move hand or foot. Convinced he was about to fall to his death, Muir suddenly became possessed of a new sense, a power that took control of his body, moving it up the rock with a positiveness and precision with which I seemed to have nothing at all to do. Davis, 2006, page 46. While the clinic may use terms like peak experience and ego dissolution, known colloquially as ego death, these were in no way figures of speech to Muir. Though few would join him on his wild expeditions, he deeply valued the companionship of his friends, who ranged from artists to scientists, with whom he was said to have a gentle, humorous, and attentive, yet highly talkative demeanor. Hiss, 1998, Merriam, 2021. Muir's form of science, with its climbing out onto slick rock death drops and being happily hungry and cold, was seen by many of his time, and ours, as only one thing: madness. Yet he too saw madness in mechanical form. His love of nature's relationality led him to seeing the so-called ordered conditions of industrialized living as making people undiffused, separate, and rigidly alone like marbles of polished stone, touching but separate. Muir and Wolff, 1938, page 320. Also seeing the places he found so personally healing quickly dwindling, he advocated both the scientific and spiritual value of places like Yosemite Valley through a stylistic synthesis of poetry and prose. This eventually led to him taking the president on a famous camping trip to Yosemite, where Muir inspired the federal protection of the valley and the subsequent creation of the United States National Park Service. Worcester, 2011, U.S. National Park Service, 2024. Though he may have spoken on a different topic, his insights into the importance of the entanglement of embodied, social, and environmental experiences equally applies to the aversion of these and preference for controlled, non-relational settings, which can be found in contemporary psychedelic research. Muir was a geologist, amateur by academic standards, but expertly trained in the art of observation and intuition. The leading view of the scientific community of the time was one which emphasized cataclysmic events of peak transformation which shaped the Earth's topology, not dissimilar from the contemporary clinical community's emphasis on transformative peak experiences. Establishment scientists like the Harvard-trained Josiah Whitney claimed the walls of Yosemite rose from a drastic bottoming out of the valley during an earthquake reminiscent of the biblical apocalypse. Muir, reading the rocks with the care a craftsperson would take attending to the carvings of a temple, saw something very different. In the polished stones of creeks, the rushing torrents of the valley's floods, and the snows that sustained through summer in the High Sierra, Muir began to feel a movement in the grooves of the granite. A dance of water and rock was taking place, slowly sculpting the beauty of the valley with glaciers over millennia. Moments of shaking up indeed played a role, but he understood them to be only one aspect of an entangled eco-geological unfolding. Slow, steady, relational, glacial, ever unfolding, these were the driving rhythms from which the venerable verticality of the valley rose. The movements of mountains are dancing to a tune measured in beats per millennium, not minute. The theory-armed Whitney rebutted and dismissed Muir's wandering eco-laboratory approach and glacially relational theory as the work of a mere amateur sheepherder, but his preconception-bound perspective was no match for the empirical findings and poetic presentation of the wandering fieldworker, Robinson, 1980. By being in this natural space and letting it be, free of imposed conceptions of what it might be, Muir could hear the songs of nature, which we transcribe and call science. In doing this, the interactive process of the water and stone could act as inspiration for Muir's method and the protection of its living field of study. In nature's relational unfolding, an experimental method of meeting and interacting with nature as it is can be gleaned, and it is often through this method we can best come to know nature. Barad, 2007. Yet there is a reason Muir is remembered not as a geologist but as a naturalist and conservationist. Yosemite is a great place for scientific findings, but so much more is to be found in that valley. There he found himself, inescapably entangled with his embedding environment, ecstatically exclaiming, "We are now in the mountains, and they are in us," kindling enthusiasm, making every nerve quiver, filling every pore and cell of us. Our flesh and bone tabernacle seems transparent as glass to the beauty about us, as if truly an inseparable part of it, thrilling with the air and trees, streams and rocks, in the waves of the sun, part of all nature, neither old nor young, sick nor well, but immortal. Just now, I can hardly conceive of any bodily condition dependent on food or breath any more than the ground or the sky. Muir, 2003, p. 27. Not only does the bodily condition described by Muir resemble the BWO, but also the difference between his and Whitney's style of science is reminiscent of another of Deleuze and Guattari's ideas, royal and nomad science. Whitney can be seen as representing royal science, which emphasizes timelessly stable laws and seeks to isolate all operations from the conditions of intuition, making them true intrinsic concepts, or categories. Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, page 391. The hylomorphic model of this royal science imposes a form that organizes matter and a matter prepared for the form. It has often been shown that this schema derives less from technology or life than from a society divided into governors and governed, and later, intellectuals and manual laborers. Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, page 395. This science operates under the centralized authority of the academy and the state, yet is reliant on the wanderers, independent scholars and immigrants alike, which are so often barred from these institutions for not conforming to their norms. The instances when these wayfarers and the fruits of their travels are not excluded is dependent upon the royal's conception of what it can appropriate. It turns the rest into a set of strictly limited formulas without any real scientific status, or else simply represses and bans it. 384. Nomad science, which royal science cannot live without, operates from a very different point of view. Exemplified by Muir, this science emerges from interactions with, as well as movement within and amongst various contexts, engaging situated practices outside centralized control. This irreducible science is one of becoming and heterogeneity, as opposed to the stable, the eternal, the identical, the constant, Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, page 383, and operates with vague, evolving, and contextual models that resist formal abstraction. This allows it to embrace the flux of multiplicity and continual transformation by focusing on a dynamic connection between support and ornament that replaces the matter-form dialectic, which nomad science applies through an intuitive methodology that presents itself as an art as much as a technique. Deleuze and Guattari, 2007, page 391. Returning to the realm of psychedelic studies, we can begin to draw parallels between the science of Muir's time and our own, and of the nomads and royalty of science. Whitney had his prescribed theory of peak moments of intensity, which created drastic change, whereas Muir encountered through embodied engagement the slowly relational unfolding required for water and rock's eros, of erosion. Where Whitney was content with a season of surveying and then theorizing from the scholar's armchair, Muir lived, breathed, and pushed his body to its limits to explore Yosemite. Worcester, 2011. While Whitney certainly felt and advocated the wonder of the Sierra, the California Geological Survey, which he led, was an essential objectivizing apparatus for those who saw only the beauty of a golden opportunity for resource extraction. Writer, 2005. On the other hand, Muir and the Sierra Club he founded saw it as a sacred eco-social garden to be revered and protected. Runty, 1993. In Muir's time, many viewed nature as unruly and prescribed it preconceptions of cataclysmically destructive moments. Robinson, 1980. Or it as something to be tamed conceptually through an objectivizing dualism, Plumwood 2002, Frank et al. 2024, and materially through the extraction of its mountains of potential capital, Marx 2000, Cronin and Demos 2003. Yet where others saw chaos, Muir saw a mother, and through a loving embrace as one might receive when returning home, via an act of being and letting be, he found himself dancing to the tune of Terra and moving with the grooved stones and stoned grooves of Gaia. The closing transition. Mixing the clinic and creative chaos control habituated clinicians often like to keep their lab coats clean and white. Yet if they take the time to trade the tunnel vision of their microscope-bound perspective for a walking stick and venture out on a fieldwork expedition of aimless wandering, they might come upon fellow scientists, dirt-covered, sleep-deprived, and dancing in the moonlit forest. The Ecology of Practices, Stenger's 2005, that is, their festive gathering, celebrates a body permeated by unformed, unstable matters, by flows in all directions, by free intensities or nomadic singularities, by mad or transitory particles. Deleuze and Guattari 2007, page 61. This unfamiliar scientific scene may indeed at first appear chaotic, as mud-puddled dance-stomp splats stain their formal white coat. Yet, if they can practice an active letting be, they may come upon fantastical findings which would only be inaccessibly defined as mystical from the limitations of their lab-controlled methodology. What would happen if they experimented with participating in an ongoing experiential turn within science? Harding 1991, Varela et al. 2003, Ingold 2021, Frank et al. 2024. If they briefly break their beakers and partake in the bodily transformation of Alice D's blotter bottle labeled "Drink Me," focus less on the force of seeming facts and more on the force of solidarity with friends, attend less to p-values and more to personal values, and drop their preconceptions like a sweat-drenched lab coat and drop it like it's hot, will this really cost them their sanity, or something they may fear losing far more, their scientific legitimacy? Perhaps they will come to find that the DJ's earthquake bass, which shakes the mountain groves, resonates with their own experience of a psychedelic shaking up of mind, and find their body moving much the same as the quivers of quakes and flows of rivers do to make the bodies of mountains dance. The dynamism of these diverse perturbations may indeed push one past critical points, forcing them to leave behind patterns they viewed as being critical and reconceiving of patterns they were previously critical of. This can indeed lead structures in a dance of tumbling turbulence, be they geological, Bach 2013, neuropsychological, Kelso 1995, psychedelic, Carhart-Harris and Friston 2019, Gurn et al. 2023, Hippolito et al. 2023, or even their combination through art in the festival setting, Mackin et al. 2023. But such is the chaotic creativity of a self-organizing nature's entanglement with the reorganization of selves. A problem faced by both early environmental conservationists like Muir and contemporary advocates of the psychedelic festival setting is that description of these spaces, however poetically eloquent or empirically exact, will never sufficiently capture their importance. The value of them can only be witnessed by participating in them, and that requires a journey into the unknown. This can certainly be a terrifying endeavor, as it forces one to forego the comfortable stability of familiarity. But fallacy favors the fearful, and so to shy away from the dissolution of preconception and thus overlook the confounding complexity of nature is simply bad science and psychedelia. Whether one takes trips to natural spaces, festivals, or psychedelic mindscapes, the true value is only properly exposed through experience. The most powerful explanandum is sometimes its own explananus. It certainly cannot be argued that the festival setting is not chaotic, but the same can be said for psychedelics, nature, mind, and all of our own lives. Life is chaotic indeed, but held in the embrace of its wildly wonderful whirling dance is an unfolding of unimaginable beauty, the birthing of psyche with every turn via its reiterative manifestation in spaces of its own emergence. In beholding this dance via dancing along, conceptions of order and entropy may transmute into an awareness of the ecology chaos that is the living, embodied connection to self, others, and nature. To clinicians concerned with catechisms, the lack of control in the ecology chaos of the festival setting may seem shaky ground to build practices of psychedelic therapy. Yet the fieldworker knows better. Wandering the rhythmically rumbling ground, they know nature's fertile soil sits balanced on the shifting multi-stability of the moving bedrock. Grooving with this subterranean dance tectonic, these scientists apply the wandering techni of their tourable tracks, turning of tables, and subtly tuned subwoofers to shake up bodies, minds, and mountain groves, and the amplification from the sympathetic resonance of this harmonization of the Sierra and Psychonauts' underground infrasounds may grow so loud that it comes to shake the fertile field of psychedelic science to its core, giving it renewed life. Nature, usually so deliberate in her operations, then created, as we have seen, a new set of features simply by giving the mountains a shake. But, on the whole, by what at first sight seemed pure confounded confusion and ruin, the landscapes were enriched, for gradually every talus was covered with groves and gardens and made a finely proportioned and ornamental base for the cliffs. In this work of beauty, every boulder is prepared and measured and put in its place more thoughtfully than are the stones of temples. If for a moment you are inclined to regard these taluses as mere draggled, chaotic dumps, climb to the top of one of them and run down without any haggling, puttering hesitation, boldly jumping from boulder to boulder with even speed. You will then find your feet playing a tune and quickly discover the music and poetry of these magnificent rock piles, a fine lesson. And all nature's wildness tells the same story: the shocks and outbursts of earthquakes, volcanoes, geysers, roaring, thundering waves and floods, the silent uprush of sap in plants, storms of every sort, each and all are the orderly beauty-making love beats of nature's heart. Muir, 2013, p. 51-52.